I grew up in the US. I was fortunate. My parents are both immigrants. I have a background of a lot of mixed cultures, Armenian, Greek, and we grew up around a really different culture than my parents grew up around. So I decided to study something art related, and I continued my education at university in a school in Florida where I studied graphic design and studio arts. Externally, things were testing me. Like I had a really low place in my life where I was depressed, and when I turned 22, right before COVID had started, my father passed away from cancer. So it was just all of these things were just coming on top of one thing after another after another. And I was like, okay, I need to find something that is, besides my art or besides my work, something that's really provides comfort, healing, and connection to God. Well, I had found yoga. I remember I had found yoga when I was in my early teen years. I think I was about like 18 when I went to my first yoga class. So I started exploring yoga more, and this is when I started really getting deep into it. And I remember immediately, I was maybe like 22, 23 years old, immediately I fell in love with it again. Even though I had practiced it before, I fell in love with it again, but on a deeper level. Hi, my name is Alina. I'm from the United States. I grew up in South Florida, and I am here in India right now to complete a 300-hour training with Raghunath. So to start with my story, I grew up in the US. I was fortunate. My parents are both immigrants. I have a background of a lot of mixed cultures, Armenian, Greek, and so my parents both came to the US, and they met in the US, and they had me and my sisters there. We grew up with around a really different culture than my parents grew up around, which I felt really blessed to have both, to have all the opportunities and the blessings and the mixed cultures that I had in the US, but then also to have my cultures of my family. And so yeah, I'm really happy to say that my childhood was really great. I have a lot of really fond memories as a kid of just kind of knowing, what I wanted and who I was. And I have two sisters who I'm very close with, and I grew up really close with. To this day, we're really good friends. And yeah, I think that the influence my parents had on me at a young age made me become the person I am now. And since I was a kid, they always were really supportive of me going after the things I wanted, to follow my dreams and to, even if it was hard, try things, which is not really common in a lot of immigrant families. It's like you have to do this, and if you don't follow the path of being a doctor or a lawyer, it's, so I was really blessed to have my parents be really supportive. And yeah, my young years were all about, growing up, trying things. And there's a lot of my childhood I don't really remember vividly, but I would say once I started getting into my teenage years, I started trying out a lot of different things. I started with dance, I did sports, I did art, music. I played piano for a long time. I loved singing. So I always explored different things, different interests and talents. And yeah, so one of them that really stuck with me was art. I drew a lot, I painted a lot. And in my free time, I think as a kid, I was really to myself. I was kind of shy and an introverted person. So I tended to find comfort in art and creating. Expressing myself through things that weren't just words. So yeah, I really fell deep into my artistry, and after my teen years, when I started to go to university, I was like, okay, what am I going to study? I don't want to just go study business or do something that I don't really relate to or find, happiness in. So I decided to study something art related, and I continued my education at university in a school in Florida, where I studied graphic design and studio arts. So I was able to explore all the realm of fine art, painting, drawing, sculpting, digital. I learned a lot of online programs, and then later, after I graduated school, I took my career into graphic design. And I wouldn't say, I'm fairly young, I'm 27 years old, so a lot of my 20s were affected by the pandemic. And I remember right after I had graduated from university, I was about 23 years old, and that was like the peak of COVID. And I was trying to navigate what I was going to do after university, and so in that, I remember in those years, I had found yoga. I remember I had found yoga when I was in my early teen years. I think I was about like 18 when I went to my first yoga class. But it was more of something that I just wanted to try, physically. I wanted to try something new. So eventually, I kind of steered away from it a bit, but then it started coming back into my life when externally things were testing me. Like I had a really low place in my life where I was depressed, and when I turned 22, right before COVID had started, my father passed away from cancer. So it was just all of these things were just coming on top of one thing after another after another. And I was like, okay, I need to find something that is, besides my art or besides my work, something that's really provides comfort, healing, and a connection to God or source. So I started exploring yoga more, and this is when I started really getting deep into it. And I remember immediately, I was maybe like 22, 23 years old, immediately I fell in love with it again. Even though I had practiced it before, I fell in love with it again, but on a deeper level, like more than just asana, more than just the physical layer, on a deeper spiritual level. So I decided to explore it more, and I think it was like within a year I did my first teacher training, and it wasn't even at a means to teach yoga. It was more at a means to just deepen my practice and my connection to spirituality and source. And so after I completed my first teacher training, I almost immediately got the opportunity to start teaching. And this was like, I think right at the cusp, right after COVID started kind of settling down a little bit. So this was 22, like middle to late 2020, not 2022. I started teaching, and yeah, I started getting these opportunities and meeting these really amazing people. And I noticed that through sharing this practice, my practice was growing. And yeah, that's kind of how I started my shift. And through the next year or two, I had continued teaching, but I was still working as a designer on the side, doing that. Well, actually, pretty much doing that more, and then teaching on the side. But I think it was, so now it's 2024. Last year, or 2 years ago, 2022, was the year that I really started to go deep into my connection with God and, Krishna. And I think at that point I didn't really know what God was for me. I was still exploring it, and it was more just this connection. And I knew that every time I took my spirituality seriously, I felt connected to something that was bigger than me. And I remember my first kirtan that I ever went to, I think it was that year. I don't remember exactly where it was, but I remember my first kirtan I ever went to. I left, and I had this like feeling that I couldn't describe, because I grew up pretty religious. My family is, I come from a family that is Orthodox Christian, and I grew up going to church, celebrating all these holidays, but not really in a sense that I chose to celebrate it. It was more just like, this is what my family gave to me. So whatever, fast forward, I started to love bhakti. I started to love kirtan. It really connected me to God, and I would leave kirtans like crying, not knowing what happened, you know, just having this feeling. And I decided that I really wanted to do a bhakti immersion or a training. And I had always known I've always known of Raghunath. Like I wouldn't say I'm like an avid listener of Wisdom of the Sages, of his podcast, but I've always known of it. You know, I've listened to episodes here and there. I have a friend who loved the podcast and had recommended it to me. So I started listening more, and I started exploring the field of bhakti more. And I remember I followed him on Instagram, and I would like see his posts. But I was never really deep into I didn't really know he had trainings or pilgrimages going on. But then last year I was like, okay, I want to do a bhakti immersion. I really want to do a training that like I leave feeling that connection with God, you know, more than just asana, more than just that physical layer of the practice. So I did my research. I was like, bhakti immersion India. I really wanted to come to India. I was like set on coming here. And then I found Raghunath's training, and it was funny because when I saw the training, I was like, wait, I know this guy. Like, you know, I follow him on Instagram. I've listened to his podcast before. So yeah, it was almost like immediately when I saw that training, I was like, this is what I want to do. You know, everything, the way he was marketing it, all of the things included in the course were exactly what I wanted. And now being here, I mean, I've been here almost 2 weeks now, we're almost at the halfway point of the training. And it's just, I'm so grateful and so blessed to be here, not only with Raghunath, but in such a special place, in the Govardhan Eco Village. I just feel the sacredness and the holiness here everywhere. I could just be walking right there and I feel the energy of Krishna. So yeah, I feel that this training, especially for me, it wasn't so much, I mean, I didn't come here with a lot of expectations, but it's really shifted everything for me, just being here for 2 weeks. You know, it's not so much about, I have to study this, like I have to know every single detail, because that's always how I've been, is like I have to take notes, I have to know everything, but it's more about just experiencing it. And you know, we do kirtan in the morning and we do kirtan in the evening every day. So it's like we start our day with that devotion and then we end our day with that devotion, and then we have the knowledge in the middle of the day and we're learning, like we're constantly sitting in lectures and gaining knowledge and information. But I think it's really special that we open and close the day with just giving that devotion and that love back to God. To Krishna, and also to everyone who's sharing the space together, like collectively. So it's really shifted me so far of just the importance of the devotion and the love. You know, you don't have to know everything, you don't have to do everything correctly, you just have to have the love and the devotion there, and if it's there, then everything else will kind of fall into place. So I mean, I've done a lot of this is my third training that I've done, and it's amazing. I was already saying, like, I'll come back next year to do a kirtan immersion. But yeah, I love everything about this practice, and I'm so happy that I found Bhakti and Raghunath to have him as a teacher is really, I feel really blessed. That's like all I can say, is I feel really blessed to have him as a teacher. Not only him, to have also Kastuba and you know, the Bobby, Cindy, everyone else who's on the team, learning the mantras, the music, the philosophy, and having all of this to take back with me when I go back to the Western world, because it's really different there, and it's really hard there to live this life, to live this devotional lifestyle on a daily basis, because in the Western world we're just so pulled back from it. Like, it's so easy to be on the complete opposite side of the spectrum. So I think for me, that's what I'm really grateful for, is to just have all of this to take with me when I go back, and then hopefully eventually get to come back to India and explore it even more. I mean, there's a lot of differences, but I think like the main difference is that people are so disconnected in the U.S. or in the Western world in general. People are really disconnected. Like they don't know why they're doing things. You know, they don't know. They're just doing it because they're wired to do it. You know, it's like they wake up, they go to work, they come back home, they make dinner, they do this, and then again the next day, all again, same things. So it's like this, it's this pattern or this habit that they just constantly do over and over again without asking themselves, well, why? You know, like what's the reason I'm doing this? Is there a purpose I'm doing this? So I feel a lot of the people in the Western world, eventually, that's why a lot of them have these midlife crises, because they're like, oh, I've spent my whole life so disconnected to my truth and God. And so I think that's the main difference. I mean, there's a lot, but.
And as you are 27, right?
Yeah.
So why today's youth are stressed and depressed in their life?
In the Western world?
In the Western world or the Eastern world?
Yeah, oh, in general.
Yeah.
Like why people are stressed and anxious, depressed?
What's your thought?
I mean, in my personal experience, because I've been really depressed before, you know, I've had experiences of feeling really low and anxious, and I really do think it's not having faith or not having trust in a higher power. And you know, people can disagree with me because sometimes people have chemical, you know, there's imbalances in the brain which causes them to be more depressed or more anxious or stressed. But I think overall, at least in my experience, was not having faith or not having trust. You know, because I think a lot of us feel that we have control over what's going on in our lives. So when things don't happen the way we want them to happen, we're like so sad and we're so low. But it's like when you realize you don't have control and you trust that the higher power is gonna provide for you, or you know, whatever, God, universe. Some people don't believe in God or don't have that connection. So I think for me that was not.
So should they go to yoga and bhakti paths like you did?
I mean, I don't think that necessarily would work for everybody. You know, I think everybody is different in the sense of what they need. I mean, I know for me, I didn't find this path until a little bit later. It was like little things leading me to where I am now. It was like these little breadcrumbs until now I'm like finally seeing it. I just think people need to start exploring, you know, practices or ways in which they can connect to their true, like their true essence, their true spirit. Because when you do that, then you're gonna realize that truth is just a reflection of God. So, but it's different, you know. I think there's different ways in which people can do that. I wouldn't necessarily say every single person is gonna heal from going to kirtan like I did. So 3 or 4 learnings from the Bhagavad Gita. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that, you know, I can take away from the Bhagavad Gita. I think the first thing that came to my mind was the idea of, you know, not attaching to outcomes. Like I remember, I don't know exactly which verse this is in, but I know Krishna constantly says to Arjuna, like, detach from the fruits of your labor. And not only in a physical way, but in general, in a spiritual way. Because I know when I first started getting really deep into yoga and spirituality, I was so attached to the consciousness, you know, I was so attached to like having that pure open consciousness, but even that in a sense is attaching to the outcome. So I think that was a really one big lesson that I got, was like not attaching to the outcome of the way I do things or why I do things, whether it's physical, spiritual. And then also, you know, karma yoga is a big topic in the Bhagavad Gita, and I've been exploring that a lot in my life lately, is like why I do things, and you know, am I doing it for right action, selfless service, or in a way to kind of receive back something, like to reverse my karma. So I explore that a lot in my life, is like, why am I doing these things? Is it selfless or is it for my own benefit? And I don't know if I can think of more off the top of my head. Mm,
Take your time. Okay.
yeah. And then also like, Dharma is like following my truth and not, we have like I have my eternal Dharma, my soul's Dharma, and then I have my temporary Dharma that I'm supposed to do at this moment, and it might change next week or it might change next year. And I like that because I know, like in the Gita, Krishna really emphasizes, like to Arjuna, you're a warrior. You have to fight. You have to overcome this obstacle so that you can come back to that essence. Yeah.
One more question.
Yeah.
So, the yoga teaching and the bhakti teaching, how does it impact your health in a good way?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it just affects my health really holistically, because obviously there's physically, I practice asana to stay in shape. That's one end of this side. But then bhakti, is like a whole different side of like maintaining my health spiritually. If I'm constantly reminding myself, if I'm constantly staying devoted to God, to love, reminding myself that it's all, no matter what happens, love is the truth, love is the essence. I think, and also just being in community. I think being here, being surrounded in the sangha of like devotees and people who are here to just, spread that Krishna consciousness and sing mantras together and talk about how much they love God and love, and all, I think that has helped me so much, is like realizing that, I'm not alone. And I know half the people here probably had to break or had to go to like a really low point before they found bhakti, unless, they were raised into it, which I wasn't, at least, so yeah. If you want to see more videos, inspirational videos around yoga, bhakti, Krishna, subscribe to the YouTube channel Wake Up and Shine, and you can find all of them there.